every dreamer in this room. There are people whose lives are tied into your dream. Own your stuff, own your business, own your way. When I was about 19 years old, I left home, and my grandmother, she gave me a quilt that she had made. And this quilt was something that I didn't really care for. It had all these different colors and these different patches in it, and I was quite embarrassed by it. I had no value in it at all. When the dog got wet, I dried him off with it. When I needed to change the oil on the car, I laid it on the ground. I had no respect for this quilt. Many years later, as I was walking past one of those fancy antique stores that I could finally go in and shop, I saw in the window a quilt that looked just like the one that she had given me. And as I'm in the store wondering where that quilt was, there was an attendant who walked up to me and said, "Let me tell you about this quilt. It was made by an African-American woman who was a former slave, and each patch in the quilt she had put in represented a part of her life. One part was from a dress that she was wearing when she found out that she was free. Another part was from her wedding dress when she jumped the broom." And as I was hearing this story, I became so embarrassed. Here I was, a person who prides myself on celebrating our heritage, our culture, and I didn't even recognize the value in my grandmother's quilt. I dismissed her work and her story because it didn't look like what I thought it should. Now, whether we know it or not, we are all sewing our own quilts with our thoughts, our behaviors, our experiences, and our memories. Like in my own quilt, one of my memories when I was about 10 years old, I remember my father standing at the door, and I was wondering why he stood there so long. He was frustrated and he walked away, and I asked my mother what was going on. She said he had worked all week and he was waiting for the man to come and pay him, and he never did. They needed the money at the time. And I tell you, she was so frustrated, she turned to me and she said, "Don't you ever stand by a door waiting for white folks to do nothing for you." Now you gotta understand, my mother wasn't a racist, but in her quilt, she couldn't imagine a world where her son was not waiting by the door for someone. In her quilt, she couldn't imagine me actually building my own door and holding that door open for thousands of people. In my mother's quilt, she couldn't imagine me owning land that was once a Confederate Army base, where Confederate soldiers plotted and planned on how to keep blacks enslaved. And now, on that very land, black people, white people, gay, straight, lesbian, transgender, ex-cons, Latin, Asian, all of us come together, working, all coming together to add patches to a quilt that is as diverse as it can be, diversity at its best. I stand here tonight to say thank you to all of the people who are celebrating and know the value of every patch and every story and every color that makes up this quilt that is our business, this quilt that is our lives, this quilt that is America. Because in my grandmother's quilt, there were no patches that represented black people on television. But in my quilt, her grandson is being celebrated by the Television Academy. I thank you for this. God bless you. You know, when I set out to help someone, it is my intention to do just that. I'm not trying to do anything other than meet somebody at their humanity. Like, case in point, this one time, I remember maybe it was about 17 years ago, I rented this building and we were using it for production. And I was walking to my car one day and I see this woman coming up out of the corner of my eye, and I say, she's homeless, let me give her some money. Judgment, I wish I had time to talk about judgment. Anyway, I reach in my pocket and I'm about to give her the money. She says, "Excuse me, sir, do you have any shoes?" It stopped me cold because I remember being homeless and having one pair of shoes and they were bent over at the heels. So I was like, yeah. So I took her into the studio. She was hesitant to go in, but we went in, we go to wardrobe, and there are all these boxes and everything around the walls and fabrics and racks of clothes. So we ended up having to stand in the middle of the floor. So as we're standing there, wardrobe, we find some shoes, we help her put them on. I stand up, I'm waiting for her to look up. And all this time she's looking down. She finally looks up, she's got tears in her eyes. She said, "Thank you, Jesus. My feet are off the ground." In that moment, I recall her saying to me, "I thought you would hate me for asking." I'm like, how can I hate you when I used to be you? How can I hate you when I had a mother who grew up in a Jim Crow South in Louisiana, rural Louisiana, right across the border from Mississippi, who at 9 or 10 years old was grieving the death of Emmett Till. As she got a little bit older, she was grieving the death of the civil rights boys and the little girls who were in the bombing in Alabama. She grieved all these years. And I remember being a little boy and coming home, and she was at home, like, what are you doing at home? You're supposed to be at work. She was in tears that day. She said there was a bomb threat, and she couldn't believe that someone wanted to blow up this place where she worked, where she took care of all these toddlers. It was the Jewish Community Center. My mother taught me to refuse hate. She taught me to refuse blanket judgment. And in this time, and with all of the internet and social media and algorithms and everything that wants us to think a certain way, the 24-hour news cycle, it is my hope that all of us would teach our kids, and not only to remember, just refuse hate. Don't hate anybody. I refuse to hate someone because they are Mexican or because they are black or white or LGBTQ. I refuse to hate someone because they are a police officer. I refuse to hate someone because they are Asian. I would hope that we would refuse hate. And I want to take this Jean Herschel Humanitarian Award and dedicate it to anyone who wants to stand in the middle. No matter what's around the walls, stand in the middle, because that's where healing happens. That's where conversation happens. That's where change happens. It happens in the middle. So anyone who wants to meet me in the middle, to refuse hate, to refuse blanket judgment, and to help lift someone's feet off the ground, this one is for you too. God bless you, and thank you, Academy. I appreciate it. Thank you. I couldn't help but think about my mother. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. I couldn't help but think about my mother. I remember being a kid at about 5 years old. She would take me into the projects with her when she played cards on Friday nights with a bunch of women. Now, these women didn't have more than a 12th grade education, but they were smart black women. They were powerful black women. They had great stories to tell. And I was a 5-year-old kid sitting there on the floor playing with my Matchbox cars, listening to them talk about their men, their relationships, and their pains. And when one of them would get really sad, another woman would come in and make a joke, and they'd all start laughing. I didn't know I was in a master class for my life. I would get home, and my father would be beating my mother and doing all kinds of things and saying all kinds of stuff to her, and he would leave the room, and I'd walk in, and I'd imitate one of those women, and she would start laughing. There was a power in that I didn't really get until I got older. I remember being about 11, 12 years old on my way to my new school, and I got to this intersection. I had to walk past pimps, prostitutes, literally walk through a graveyard, get to this intersection, 6-lane intersection, and there was a man standing there saying, "Will someone help me cross? Will someone help me cross?" And there were all of these people that kept passing by him and passing by him. I said, "I'll help you cross." So he told me he was going to my school and he was going to sell candy there. That's how he made his living. So I helped him cross the street to get there. We became good friends. His name was Mr. Butler. That moment reminded me of my mother, bringing her out of pain into laughter to help her cross. My first 10 movies were all about her subconsciously, wanting her to know that she was worthy, wanting black women to know you're worthy, you're special, you're powerful, you're amazing. All of that was about helping her cross. When I started hiring people like Taraji and Viola Davis and Idris Elba, they couldn't get jobs in this town, but God blessed me to be in a position to be able to hire them. I was trying to help somebody cross. When I built my studio, I built it in a neighborhood that is one of the poorest black neighborhoods in Atlanta, so the young black kids can see that a black man did that and they can do it too. I was trying to help somebody cross. The studio was once a Confederate Army base, and I want you to hear this, which meant that there was Confederate soldiers on that base plotting and planning on how to keep 3.9 million Negroes enslaved. Now that land is owned by one Negro. It's all about trying to help somebody cross. While everybody was fighting for a seat at the table, talking about Oscar so white, I said, y'all go ahead and do that. But while you fighting for a seat at the table, I'll be down in Atlanta building my own. Because what I know for sure is that if I could just build this table, God would prepare it for me in the presence of my enemies. Rather than being an icon, I want to be an inspiration. So thank you, BET, my new family. Thank you, everybody. I want you to hear this. I was maybe about 18 years ago, I bought this house, and I kept getting these insane water bills. The water bills were just insane. Like, why are these water bills so crazy? I'm a single man living in this house. Anyway, my neighbor told me I needed to dig a well. So I called this guy over to come, an engineer. He comes out, and we're walking the yard, and he's putting out all of these orange flags as to all these places he thinks that we could find water. As he's digging one, I said, okay, go ahead. So as he starts digging this one well, didn't hit anything. And I was like, wait a minute, you just dug this deep and I still have to pay you even though you didn't hit water? He's like, that's how it goes. I'm like, okay, fine. So then he goes on to the next one. Little flag, he's digging, never hits water. He goes to the next one, never hits water. And I keep having to pay these bills. And I got so frustrated, I said, never mind, I'll just keep paying the water bill because I'm not gonna do this. A few months passed, I still get these crazy water bills. So what I decided to do was call him back. So he comes back out. I said, you dig right here, this well, and you dig and you don't stop until you hit water. So he starts digging. He gets down to about 800 feet. He said, we haven't hit water, this is pretty deep. I said, you keep going. Gets down a little deeper, still has not hit water. I said, you keep going, you keep going. He said, okay, we're gonna take the night off. We're over 1,000 feet deep, we'll be back in the morning. That night I thought about it, I said, you know what, I'm just wasting money, I'm not gonna do it. As soon as he gets in the morning, I'm gonna tell him to stop digging. That morning he comes out, he starts the machine, I'm on my way down to him, the machine starts. He was 4 inches away from the water that I needed. Why am I telling you all this? Why am I talking about digging for water? In this world, we're all digging wells. In our lives, we're digging wells. We're digging wells in relationships where we put all this time and effort and energy, and sometimes it doesn't give us what we need. We put all our time and effort and energy in our dreams and our business, and it doesn't give us what we need or what we were after. But if you just keep digging, my God, if you could just hear me right now, just keep digging. You may be 4 inches away from every gift and every blessing that you've ever wanted in your life. Had I given up when I was homeless, when I was sleeping in my car, when I was hungry, had I given up these people that you see on this screen right now would not be a part of my dream. There are people who are tied into your dream and your destiny, and you are worthy of getting to your goal. Keep digging. Don't stop. And let me tell you something, like I tell everyone here, listen to me, when you get there, when you get to that water and you see it's coming and you know you have what you need, this is what I want you to always remember. Make sure that everybody you run into meets you at your worth.